Right, so this fight card right here, it does look very underwhelming. I'm not going to lie to you. But this fight here is actually a good fight to open it up in bantamweight. And we're going to start off with Vinicius Oliveira versus Benardo Sopaj. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've got to go with Vinicius Oliveira. And you might thinking, whoever's going to win this fight, it will be by KO. I actually think it's going to go to a decision because Benardo Sopaj fights in a way where it's very passive. He kind of stays on the back foot at times, or when he's coming forward, he's doing a lot of level changes and feints and movements to like push you back, and a lot of his opponents spy on them. From what I've seen with Vinicius Oliveira, like he's fought guys like Christian Quinones, the guy who bottled that fight against Raoni Barcelos, made a good account of himself until a doctor's stoppage happened in that fight. And against Sopaj, I think he's going to struggle because Vinicius leaves his hands down, so it's very hard to see where the punches are coming from. And the reason you'll see him get knocked out is from over aggressiveness. He'll rock his opponent and get really excited and get like an urge to like knock them out, and that's led to him getting knocked out. But I think because of how Benardo Sopaj kind of like stays on the back foot and he's not very aggressive, there's not going to be a moment where he can catch him with like a massive shot to overload with combinations. And even if he does, Sopaj will look for takedowns because that's another thing he does. But he's predominantly a striker, but Vinicius Oliveira has some decent takedown defense. So it makes a good matchup on the feet where I think it'll be an entertaining fight, but I think Oliveira will win 29-28 just on damage. But Sopaj has a good chance of knocking him down in this fight. And so does Oliveira. Right, we have a fight here that should have never been made. And I'm going with Ľudovít Klein. And I think he can finish this guy AJ Cunningham in the first round. And if you don't know about this guy, his dad is such a POS. He gave him steroids as a child. So technically, he's not natural because once you take steroids, even if it clears out your system, you've taken it before. It's not his fault though. That's the problem. But from what I've seen from this guy anyway, he tends to get hit a lot. He doesn't really move his head. We saw him get KO'd on the Contender Series. And he's coming up against a guy with experience like Ľudovít Klein. This fight, and it's on short notice by the way, it should never happen. This is just an unfair matchup where Ľudovít Klein throws a lot of straight punches. If you're coming up against a guy who don't move his head, you are going to find the target with ease by throwing a straight punch. And I think I'm going to predict a KO just by using the boxing. I don't even think he'll use like a kick to try and knock him out. He'll just do like a 1-2. AJ Cunningham will go out cold, and he won't be able to out-grapple him either, because if he does, Ľudovít Klein will stop the takedowns. He won't be able to just bring it down, so it's a horrible matchup for him, and I've got to go with Ľudovít Klein. Right, Christian Leroy Duncan versus Claudio Ribeiro. I do think Leroy Duncan's quite overrated in my opinion. I do think he'll win this fight, but I think he'll win it by decision, because Claudio Ribeiro is one of those dangerous guys where he can put you out in seconds with his power. But then again, he's not too technical and he's just pretty much like how heavyweights fight, swinging and hitting and hoping he can get a knockout. He took a brutal head kick against Roman Kopylov. You might be thinking against Leroy Duncan, a guy who likes to throw a lot of kicks. But the difference between Kopylov and Leroy Duncan is he is so predictable when he throws kicks. He telegraphs things way too much. You can see when the spin's coming. So I think Ribeiro will either wait for him to like miss a kick and then jump in and try and blitz him, or he will see when the things are coming and stay on the outside and then look to come forward and not blitz him. But Leroy Duncan, his last performance looked good against Dennis Tululin. We were seeing the kickboxing, he tried to get him against the cage, and we just started seeing the punches and elbows that we haven't really seen from him. He's more of a kickboxer, but he likes to mix up some flying knees. And the UFC London card, that was just a lucky win there. But I do think in this fight here, if he can stop telegraphing and just use his kicks without spinning and wasting energy, he can just kick Ribeiro in the body and use them kicks to win a fight, because his boxing's not amazing. It really isn't. He's got some good elbows, but when you're talking about like pure jabbing, moving with his head and stuff, it's not great. He was getting clipped a few times by Armen Petrosian. But I do think Claudio Ribeiro is just a guy where if he can't knock you out, he can't win a fight, because he's not technical and he just hopes to land on you and knock you out cold. And I do think Leroy Duncan, he's got the ability to knock him out, but I think he'll be a bit more like patient because he knows the danger and power of Ribeiro, so he'll like try and pick him apart to a decision. Okay, Loik's Radzhabov versus Abdul Karim Al-Selwady. I've got to go with Karim to win this fight 100%. He was so underrated going into that fight with George Hardwick, me included, but I've got to pick him to beat Loik Radzhabov because he was a guy where he can leg kick and he can jab away. Against Loik's Radzhabov, the meta to do against him is a leg kick. He can't take a leg kick. And if you watch the fight with George Hardwick and Abdul, the footwork weren't there, the body shots weren't working, and he didn't use the leg kicks. And I believe against Loik Radzhabov, Abdul Karim knows all you've got to do is keep leg kicking him. And if Loik Radzhabov thinks he can just walk him down, he can't. Because what Abdul will do is he will jab away and just stay on the back foot. So Loik Radzhabov's going to have to come to him because Abdul Karim doesn't usually walk down opponents. He usually waits for you to come forward and then... And not only that, he can mix up the takedowns, but I don't think he'd want to use the takedowns against a guy like this because I saw that guillotine he got over Zach Zane on Eagle FC and it looked brutal. Like, he's got tight, like, Dagestani grip chokes. So I think Abdul's just going to be patient on the feet and let Loik's Radzhabov keep walking him down and just get jabbed on the outside. That's how he fights. So I think it'll be a decision for Abdul. Right, Javid Basharat versus Aiemann Zahabi. He got very lucky. Javid Basharat was struggling with Victor Henry, who puts on a high pace. But the alternative is, this is a perfect matchup for Javid Basharat. And I've got to go with a decision. And when will this guy ever get a ranked opponent? It seems like they just want to give him, not easy fights, well you could call them that, but fights that are not challenging enough for him. And Aiemann Zahabi is a guy where the type of guy he likes to beat is an aggressive striker like Eryk, who was just aggressive from the start. Throwing a leg kick, bang, you get caught with an overhand or a left hook and you get put down. That's the type of opponent he wants. An opponent who's going to walk him down because he's not really an active striker. He's quite defensive, waiting for you. Then he'll release like an overhand or like a hook or something like that. Javid Basharat is going to be annoying for him because Basharat will walk him down, but he's going to be constantly moving into different angles when he throws punches, which is going to make the timing of Zahabi much harder to land on a guy like Basharat. Yes, his dad's the Zahabi, who's like very smart, GSP, whatever you want to say, but it's not always about the coaches because a coach can't fight for him. And I believe that Javid Basharat is just too high level for Zahabi. Zahabi's old now, you're at bantamweight, you want to be younger. Javid Basharat looks good in each fight. He struggled against the guy who was matching the pace of him. Zahabi won't do that, and I can just see him getting like jabbed, getting taken down. He gets back up to the feet, and then you see Javid Basharat start mixing up some leg kicks, cutting off the angle, then firing off the cross, and just putting on a high pace on an older guy. And he just can't compete with him because he's just not that level. Right, the battle of the, some people would say, cans. Eryk Anders didn't used to be a can, but he's became a can now. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Jamie Pickett won, but Anders, for me, is going to win by decision. And the reason I'll say why, people struggle to get down Jamie Pickett, for example. Bo Nickel. He had to knee him in the nuts to get him down. Josh Friend didn't get a takedown. He got control because Jamie Pickett was messing about on the ground and losing positions. Like Jamie Pickett was a striker who's now turned into a bit of a guy who wants to grapple. And I believe a fight we're going to get between Anders and Pickett will be a wrestling match where Anders is the much stronger wrestler. I don't think he'll ground and pound finish him because I think Jamie Pickett's good at just surviving but not doing anything. And Eryk Anders will just bully him on the ground. Jamie Pickett should just not be in the UFC, in my opinion. He's not UFC level. He's very average. He gets bullied in fights. It doesn't always have to be through grappling. It can be by like just getting outboxed on the feet. He got into the UFC off having another chance in the Contender Series of beating a guy of 6-4. It's just not good for him. Eryk Anders has arguably beat Lita Machida. I don't think he did, but he got close to doing it. And most people would say he probably did beat Lita Machida. And I know it was back in the day and we don't want to have like a history channel here. But Eryk Anders, for me, boxing's not that great. He does have power at times, but it's usually against guys with Soy Jiu-Jitsu. for example, Carl Dalkaus, who just relies on it and can't strike or really wrestle to a high extent. And Eryk Anders, for me, is just going to have to just use the wrestling. I know he'll struggle to get him down, but I believe he'll hug him against the cage, get a load of control time, maybe get like 1 or 2 takedowns and just win because Jamie Pickett can do nothing at all. Alright, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Behzat Almakhan. I think this is fairly obvious. Umar Nurmagomedov, and what am I going to pick? Decision. This guy just looks just like what you think of when you think of a Kazakhstan or Dagestani type of fighter. Will wrestle you and try and hug you. You're not doing that to Umar Nurmagomedov. It just will not happen because Umar throws a lot of front kicks through the middle. He could get another knockout due to this guy trying to pressure forward. He kind of rushes forward at times, looking to land strikes to get close and then get the clinch. You do that against Umar, like I've mentioned, that kick will be onto your forehead. And I can see that happening in a fight right here, which is why I am going to predict him to do it by decision because I think all he's going to have is takedowns. And Umar's not really a powerful striker. He can kick you and do like cut damage, but he won't kick you and knock you out power. Yes, he got a knockout on Raoni Barcelos, but that was like rare. And that was just like the perfectly timed strike, but he's not really known as a guy with power. Against Nate Maness, he landed a few good side kicks to the head, and a lot of us are probably underrating this guy, but I've seen it happen too many times now. A guy comes to the UFC and they have a good record, padded record, just like that guy. I've forgotten his name. He fought against Jamal Emmers. Hussein Ashabov, 23 and like 1 or something, comes to the UFC, gets fraud checked. And this is the type of guy where, against a guy like Umar, he can end up getting fraud checked. You look at his record, it's actually embarrassing when you see some of like the finishes. Refuse to fight. When do you ever hear about a fighter refusing to fight? That just don't really happen. Not only that only happened once and the guy got cut out of the UFC. And you're seeing injury, referee stoppage, which means he's inflicting a lot of damage, corner stoppage, and these wins here which you don't know about and you can't find out about. And yeah, his record looks good when you look at, he's got 13 wins by knockouts, but how many of them were being stopped because they don't want to see anymore? How many were like ground and pound? None of them were like, I can't say none of them, but they're not majority like knockout finishes where you're thinking of like flatline knockout power, like Jeremy Stevens. No. So Umar Nurmagomedov, he should easily win this fight. If he doesn't, questions need to be asked, honestly. Steve Erceg versus Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell's the meme of the flyweight division, and you've got to go Steve Erceg. Boxing, clinching's way too good for Matt Schnell. He's one of these jiu-jitsu guys who... He did get that good comeback over Sumajiri, but that's like the highlight, and knocking down Brandon Royval. He got submitted, but he ended up knocking him down. But he's not powerful. He's not really that good in any area, so I think Steve Erceg beats him to a decision. It's a flyweight fight. Steve Erceg's not really known for power, even though he knocked down, I believe, David Dorat with that like spinning wheel kick, but he could also get a submission because he's a better jiu-jitsu guy than Matt Schnell. The only difference between the two, Steve Erceg is very hittable, and he can get hit a lot, especially when he don't move his head. Like I believe Shane Young caught him a few times, who's also bad. I can't remember if that's his name, but there was one fight in another promotion where you could see he don't really move his head. He can eat a shot. He's got a great chin, but Matt Schnell's the opposite. He's got a bad chin. Yes, he can do jiu-jitsu, but he can get rocked all over the place, like in the fight here. And against Brandon, he can make mistakes which lead to him getting submitted, and he was able to submit him with a one-hand guillotine. So it shows you how good Brandon Royval's jiu-jitsu is, but for Matt Schnell, it seems like once he gets in a bad situation, he can't get out of it. And he beat Tyson Nam, which you might think was a good win. He's a very like hit-or-miss fighter in the flyweight division, but to me, he's like a meme, and he was like a stat pad win for anyone above him in that division. Like Manel Kape would steamroll that guy if he ever got to fight him. And Matt Schnell, for me, no worries about this. The only worry I have is if Steve Erceg gets injured, because Steve Erceg's clinching will neutralise any striking offence by Matt Schnell. And Matt Schnell can't just pull guard on him because Steve Erceg's better at jiu-jitsu. So Steve Erceg should win it comfortably. 30-27. Right, Alex Perez versus Mohamed Mokaev. You might call this guy the pull-out merchant, but I agree. Mohamed Mokaev, I believe he can get a round 1 submission over Alex Perez because Mohamed Mokaev is a very aggressive wrestler. Alex Perez is a guy who's got a very good volume striking style. But the problem with him is, you might be like, oh, he has jiu-jitsu. His jiu-jitsu only works when he's on top of his opponent. You may argue the same about Mohamed Mokaev. Like, if you look at Perez's record, you don't really see any defensive submissions like a triangle. You don't really see them type of... You're seeing submissions where he was on top of his opponent. Whereas with Mokaev, to be honest with you, I think he can because he's got a strong guillotine when he can do it. He did it to Cody Durden. Cody Durden is a very hard guy to submit. He's got that like Dagestani strength in him, or like grit, like they say about these Dagestanis. Like Cody Durden's a guy who don't tap out. His arm was about to break and he don't. But a guillotine from Mokaev, and I think a guillotine in this fight is a good shout because Perez is not a stronger wrestler than Mokaev. So Mokaev's going to beat him for the first takedown, and then as soon as you can get the first takedown against Alex Perez, you end up losing the fight. And that is what will happen here. So I just can't see Perez winning. Been way too inactive, pulling out of loads of fights. Been out for over a year. Got submitted in that fight because he gets the takedown, gives away the back too easy, rear naked choke, done, finished. So it's just unfortunate for him. I'm surprised he kept his ranking in this division, but he needs to fight a striker to win. Like, yes, you might look and see he beat Joseph Formiga, who's a guy known for getting takedowns, but Joseph Formiga is one of these jiu-jitsu guys as well. He's not really known for, like, destroying people on the ground. He did it to Figueiredo, but he's not like an extremely strong wrestler like Mokaev. He's a jiu-jitsu guy who's not got that good striking. Whereas Mokaev, striking's not really that good. It's not really been tested, and you might be like, he gets caught in submissions because he's very aggressive, one. And another reason he gets caught in submissions is because he tends to leave his chin exposed for them when he goes for takedowns, when he lifts up people really high and slams them. Like in almost every fight, he's been almost submitted. But against Alex Perez, he's the type of guy, like I've mentioned, doesn't go for defensive submissions. He makes silly mistakes that cause him to get submitted. So I think it'll be the first fight in a long time where we don't see Mohamed Mokaev get in a position where he's about to get submitted and he'll just coast through Alex Perez first round. Right, Victor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro. Honestly, he shouldn't be at them odds. No way. It's not guaranteed. But I would just go with Petrino. And again, you're going to be confused with why I'm doing this decision. I think it's going to be hard to submit a guy like Pedro who's got decent jiu-jitsu. Even though he's been submitted to guys, but they're to more experienced guys than Petrino. He's just a ball of muscle who has power, who sometimes can struggle to knock out his opponent. Apart from the last fight, I was starting to think, what is Petrino? Because he used to be a striker, then he turned into a guy who looks to just hold you down and get a submission. And that's what he did against Marcin Prashino and against Anton Tekelagi, using the wrestling. And I believe against Tyson Pedro, knowing he doesn't have good takedown defense and not taking any risk with the striking, because even though you have more power than Pedro, Pedro's more technical with his striking. Like Victor Petrino is one of those guys where, yes, he got a very technical check hook, which you would call a very advanced move, but he's not really technical in general. It's a lot of swinging and trying to knock you out like a lot of heavyweights would do, even though we're not at heavyweight. And Tyson Pedro is more short and precise, sets up with the jab, then the cross, and then drops you, puts you out cold. Like, look what he did to the Pleasure Man, as he calls himself. And the fact that this guy beat a guy like Khalil Rountree also baffles me as well. But I do believe Victor Petrino is going to go out there and just hug Tyson Pedro, and him being bigger than him having a chin on him being like a guy like Johnny Walker who should be fighting at heavyweight realistically. It's going to be too hard for a guy like Pedro to win this fight unless he can just stay on the outside and just box him and just be too technical to the point where you can't grab hold of him using good footwork, which I don't see happening. So I think he's just going to bully him on the ground and end up going to a decision. Right, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Gaziev. It might seem underwhelming, but I'm going to go with Rozenstruik to win. I'm going to go with round 2 KO. And the reason I've picked round 2 is because, one, in the first round, Shamil Gaziev is going to come out with some straight punches and wait for an opportunity for Jairzinho Rozenstruik to give away the back. And that is when he's going to look for the rear naked choke attempt. I don't think he's going to shoot in until the second round when he's hurt, because I've noticed with Gaziev, doesn't really shoot for takedowns. He will wait until there's an opportunity to use jiu-jitsu, or if the opponent gives away a foolish position, then he'll jump on top of them. Like Buday's shooting in on him because he was hurt, which led to him being on the ground, and Gaziev doesn't mind staying there. Jairzinho Rozenstruik will never panic shoot on people. He won't, but he will headhunt and not always use his kickboxing how you would think. Like, he's meant to be a kickboxer, but it feels like he's a headhunter who uses boxing only at times. And Shamil Gaziev, he's the full package. But again, he's new. He's only had one fight in the UFC, not counting the Contender Series. And he beat at Buday. But the reason he beat at Buday is because he wasn't fighting back. If you just start punching someone and they just stand there like a boxing bag, well then it doesn't really show that much. But the Contender Series showed that he has got the jiu-jitsu. But that Buday performance, as good as he made him look, I can't sit here and say that is a key determining factor to beat a ranked guy like Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And I know the days of just being a basic boxer in the heavyweight division is fading, but I think Shamil Gaziev, he likes to use his striking a bit more than he likes to use his wrestling, a bit like Curtis Blades. And I think that could cause problems because Jairzinho Rozenstruik has got good cardio. I'm not sure Gaziev has yet. We're not sure on that. There's a lot of questionable things about him because he's new. And I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik will look to come forward on Gaziev and not allow him to just use that straight jab followed by that cross to the body. And I think he'll hit harder than Shamil Gaziev. And then when Gaziev gets touched on the chin, he's not going to be used to being hit by a guy of Rozenstruik's power with the speed he can throw at. So although he's not as technical as like a Cyril Gane or something, he can catch you with power and put you up. Same with Gaziev. But Gaziev's not a one-punch knockout guy. He's a guy who will wear you down with either a body shot or straight punches down the centre. Jairzinho Rozenstruik's a guy where if you come close in the pocket with him, he will swing like his Francis Ngannou and look for a knockout. And I think that's where Gaziev will struggle. It's either going to be an early finish or we're going to see a fight where they both are like, right, we respect each other's power, and like some heavyweight fights, how they go, they'll go to a decision because they're just, I don't know what it is, they can just turn into a snooze fest at times because they get tired. And I don't think he's just going to go out there and just ragdoll Rozenstruik because his takedown defence ain't even that bad. Okay, he's been taken down by Blades, a very strong grappler, and he's been taken down by Alistair Overeem, who has flawed and made people like Sergey Pavlovich look easy at his older age. But Shamil Gaziev, he can wrestle. I've seen him do it on other promotions, but against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, I think he'll struggle because he's not just a can in another promotion. He's a guy with experience who's got relatively okay takedown defense for a heavyweight, decent cardio. It's a 5-round fight. The longer the fight goes, it favours Rozenstruik, to my knowledge right now, even though I know Gaziev can grapple. But from the cardio I've seen from this heavyweight here, I think Rozenstruik, second round or third round, he's going to TKO Gaziev. Like, look what he did to Alistair Overeem in the last seconds of the fight. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.